We are recording the interview of John Rogers. This interview is being conducted by David Morse from the Wright State University's Veteran Voices Project. This interview is being recorded at Wright State University's Veteran Military Center in Dayton, Ohio. It is 1:01 p.m. on August 1st, 2019. All right, John. So let's start off with where and when you were born.
I was born in Okemah, Oklahoma, July 1st, 1944.
Okay, all right. And who were your parents?
My father was a Presbyterian minister, Lewis Rogers. Mother's name is Laura Elizabeth, actually.
Okay. And what was her occupation?
She was a housewife.
Housewife. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Some of the most important jobs.
That's right.
And did you have any siblings?
Have a brother that's 5 years older, he's an Air Force veteran also, and a sister that's 2 years older.
Okay. All right. So how did it feel being the youngest?
I never knew any different.
Never knew any different, right? I guess so. So before you entered into the military, what were you doing?
Just going to school, went through the usual junior high and high school route, and went to college from there.
Okay.
Played athletics in high school, got into hot rods and cars and mechanical things.
What was your favorite car?
Well, I was a mechanic on a race car. We had a drag car, a 59 Chevrolet Biscayne, and I was a mechanic on that. And then a little later on, we had a couple of super stock Plymouths that we raced when they got into racing. So,
wow,
that was back in the early days of drag racing. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, yeah. Did you guys have a track that you raced on, or was it pretty much on the street?
Mostly, we lived in between Oklahoma City and Tulsa, so we usually used, they had a drag strip in Tulsa and a drag strip in Oklahoma City, and those were our two mainly home areas, but we covered a lot. We raced some in Texas, a lot in Texas, some in New Mexico, Arkansas, and Kansas. Went to, I think one time, as far as we ever went was Memphis.
Nice. Very nice. Got a friend that actually worked here that he's big into dragster. He's got a dragster himself. Does a lot of stuff. Marine veteran, actually. So you decided to go from high school to college. Right. What college did you end up going to?
Went a year at the University of Tulsa, and after that I transferred to Oklahoma State University.
Oklahoma State University. Okay. And what was it that directed your path towards joining the military?
The draft.
The draft.
Draft. I was in my, well, actually I was a 5-year student in college, and the draft deferment ran out after 4 years. That's all you gave you for a deferment. So I had a year to go, and I had to collect all my paperwork, a letter from my advisor, my enrollment thing for the next year, and I actually had to go down and meet the draft board and ask for another year extension on my student deferment, and which they reluctantly gave me. But I can still remember, and I started to say old men. You know, they were probably 45 or so. To college student, they seemed like old men. I can remember that one. He gave me the finger treatment. He said, next May, he said, you're number one on the list.
Wow.
But I did get a year, and gave me enough time to make some plans and figure out what I wanted to do.
Sure. All right. So you're in college. Now, what year did you enter into college?
62, 63 was our first year in college.
Okay. All right. And yeah, so Vietnam was pretty was
By
ramping up.
the time I had to go to meet the draft board, that was 66, 67, and things were really hot.
Yeah.
And were really rolling.
Right.
So.
Okay, so you just kind of staying on with the college there. What degree were you pursuing?
Oklahoma State had a what they call a mechanical technology degree. And actually, the initial program was a 2-year program, and then if you wanted to, you could extend that into, they had several options that you could extend that to a 4-year to get a bachelor's degree. And I completed that mechanical technology degree and then went into industrial education to get a bachelor's degree.
Okay. All right. So this was right in line with what you've been experiencing.
Yeah, I had
with
kind of a mechanical background, and that just really it was where my interest was at, and that's what I wanted to get into.
That's really good. Okay, so what was it? You said about 67 when you graduated.
Graduated in 67. Yeah.
Okay, so 1967 you graduate, and what was your decision at this point? How do you move?
Well, I've been looking at that whole year. Back then, Vietnam, the way it was, every week on the front page of the paper, they listed the casualty statistics for the week. And you can look at that, and it'd be, Army would be 200 and some, and the Marines would be 100 and some, the Navy would be a dozen, and the Air Force would be like 6 or 8, you know. So after looking at that week after week after week, I said, got to be a plan here. There's got to be something to that. So, and my brother was in the Air Force. I had an uncle that was a career Air Force, and my brother was 5 years older than I was. He was in the Air Force, and he seemed to enjoy it. So I thought that was probably the way to go. So I went down to visit the Air Force recruiter and signed up.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Now, was this enlisted?
No, I got into OTS. I took all the exams and that stuff, and he kept bugging me. He thought I ought to apply to be a pilot, and I had some medical things that I felt sure would eliminate me from being a pilot. But the recruiter, he said, I get so many extra points if you go down and take the pilot's exam. You know, he said I get points for that. So I thought, well, to be a nice guy, I'll go down and I'll take the test there. So I went down, took the test, passed the thing, you know, and then he gets all excited. He says, "Oh, you got to go down and take the physical." He said, "You're going to be a pilot. I just know it." So I told him, I was very upfront about it. I said, "I've got some issues. I don't think, you know, that I can pass a physical." And he said, "Well, I get points for you know if you go down and take the physical, I get points." So I thought, okay, I'll go there. So I go down to Tinker Air Force Base and took the physical, and darn if I didn't pass the physical. So he's got me signed up going to pilot training, going to OTS, and then supposedly going to pilot training. And I got sworn in on July the 5th, 1967. Ended up in San Antonio at Officer Training School. And it was 105 the day we got to San Antonio. Barracks run air conditioning, you know, it was a typical deal.
Wow.
But took I think they run you through three physicals that the guys supposedly go into pilot training. And at every time they would send a whole group of us over to take a physical, about half of them would get eliminated, you know. And I began to believe him after I passed the initial physical, and we got down there and things were looking good. I passed the first two rounds of physicals. I passed and got down to the third round, and they said, "Man, can't take you."
Oh wow.
So.
Huh. Yeah, I didn't realize that there was different rounds of physicals.
Yeah,
training.
they kept eliminating guys right and left.
Wow. Okay, so let's back up just a little bit and talk about how your family felt when you had made the decision to join the Air Force.
I don't think they had any objections. You know, I had a brother in, my uncle had retired, and who was my mother's brother-in-law was retired, and she talked to her sister. Her sister was had been Air Force wife for 20-some years, and had just loved it. My brother was in, and he seemed to be having a good time. So I don't really think they had any objections to it. Later on, when I got the Vietnam assignment, my mother was absolutely convinced that I was not going to go. For whatever reason, she had her mind made up I mean, right up till the couple of weeks before I left, she absolutely didn't think I was going to go. And I guess that was her, positive thinking on her part, I guess, that she didn't want me to go. But I don't remember any real negative input from my parents. I had just got married. I got married my last year in college, I was married. So I had a brand new wife, and she understood the whole draft thing. We had talked about that before, so she knew that I was probably going to serve.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Yeah. That's good. She was very supportive of all
She
that.
was.
Yeah, that's awesome.
She was.
That's really good. That's real crucial in marriage, especially military type marriage. Yeah. Okay. So you're in and get through that third round of physicals, and they say you're not going to be a pilot. What does the Air Force decide to do with you at that point?
All the guys that got rejected, they loaded us all on a bus and they took us over to Lackland Air Force Base, and we sat down with the career people, and they made us sit through a film that showed all Air Force career, typical recruiter film. They showed us almost every career field the Air Force had. I don't remember how long the film was, but at the end of the film, the lights come back on and the film goes off, and the guy says, and I don't know how many career fields there were, yeah, you've been there, you know how many there are a bunch of them. And after the lights came back on, he said, okay, and he starts passing out the forms, and he says, there's 4 openings. He said, admin officers, missile launch officers, aircraft maintenance officers, and vehicle maintenance officers. He said, you can sign up for one of those 4 career fields. After we sat through that whole film. And there I am. That was my initial paperwork that I filled out back in the early stages of the recruiting. I had signed up for aircraft maintenance or vehicle maintenance, which went along with my mechanical background. I didn't know anything about airplanes, but that sounded like a fun thing.
Sure.
And lo and behold, there, when it gets down to the very end, they say, yeah, here's your picks. 2 of my picks are already on the list, so I signed up for aircraft maintenance.
That's great. That's awesome. Okay, so you end up signing up for aircraft maintenance, and then are you? I'm assuming you're sent to another tech school, or
right after you get the commission, they send you to tech school.
Okay.
The aircraft maintenance course was at Rantoul Air Force Base in Illinois, which we got there early fall or mid-fall, and left in May, I guess. I think it seemed like a 6 months course or 5 months course, something like that. And it was really cold in Rantoul, Illinois.
Oh yeah.
In Oklahoma, boy, I wasn't quite used to the cold. It was really cold.
It's really cool.
Especially when you had, I think our class started at 6 o'clock in the morning. They were running guys through there. They had a full school up there. They had 2 sessions a day. One started, I think, 6 in the morning and went till noon, and the other one started at probably 1 and went till 6 or something like that. So.
Wow. Now, before we dive into tech school, so I'm really interested in this. I have to go back to OTS real quick. Because this was essentially your, was this kind of like your basic training?
Yes.
Was OTS?
Yeah.
Okay. Talk to me a little bit about OTS. How long was it? What was it about?
OTS is where they make an officer out of you, and they try to teach you. They preach the Air Force doctrine and how to salute and how to march, and very little of that. Most of it was book training on the structure of the Air Force, the command structure, just like a college short course, on the military. And it had been shortened to a 10-week course because they were dragging so many guys into the military at that point because of Vietnam. we were the first course. They had lengthened it. Originally it was a 12-week course, shortened to 10 weeks. Then they had gone back to 12 weeks. Our class was the first one to go back to 12 weeks. Problem with that was they weren't prepared curriculum-wise to go back to 12 weeks. So we got down to the end of 10 weeks and basically all our curriculum work was over and we had 2 weeks to kill. So in our particular class, they were going to fill that with, they were going to let us go over to the, they called it the confidence course, you know, the PT course, obstacle course, and the firing range, and they're going to give you a bunch of outdoor activities. And a hurricane blew into Texas, came in from the coast and came up through San Antonio, and it rained for about 2 weeks solid during that 2 weeks period, so we couldn't, almost all the outdoor activities were canceled. So basically the last 2 weeks we sat in the barracks and played cards and watched movies.
Oh boy, that's wow, that's interesting. All right. Any instructors during your officer training school that stand out to you?
One of we had 2 different squadron leaders, whatever they call them. They were commissioned officers. One of them was a major who was F-105 pilot, just back in Vietnam, and he had a medical problem. I think that's why he was down there as an instructor, because they'd taken him off flight status for a while. But yeah, we had got a lot of good war stories out of that. Not all the guys were so lucky. So we had a daily war story from him, which was pretty interesting. Don't remember a whole lot about the other guy. He was a captain. But, they pretty much kept you in line and oversaw all your activities on a daily basis.
That's good. That's good. I'm wondering, because basic training, you know, everything we did. You know, if we did something wrong, we were potentially killing everyone within our unit or flight or whatever they called it. I can't remember. But did they have any of those kinds of conversations with you guys? You know, if you made a mistake or anything like that, did they say you just killed however many people?
No, I don't remember that.
Really?
Yeah, they were. You know, I think I had a pretty good grasp of what was going on when we went there. And they had a little bit of the basic thrown in, and we went to our PT training and went to marching practice and that kind of stuff. You know, we had a drill sergeant, and some of the guys didn't know the right foot from the left foot. I wasn't the greatest marcher in the world, and the Air Force didn't worry too much about, you know, that kind of drill and that kind of stuff. Sure. But you had the guys that didn't know their left and their right and all that. And they were pretty hard on those guys. And I was amazed that everybody there was a college graduate. And I was always amazed at the guys that mentally wore on them. You know, some of them just weren't prepared for that. And to me, it was kind of like, you know, hey, it's kind of a game. If you screw up, they can't eat you, you know, if you screw up. Don't think they're going to kick you out, because they're so hard effort people. I don't think they're going to kick you out just because you can't march. So, you know, the academics was kind of tough. You had to make a certain academic score. They scored, your classes were broken up into, like 3-week courses, something like that. And you had like Air Force history class and a command structure class and all that type of thing. And there was a test at the end of 3 weeks. You had a test, and they scored the test, and there were guys that got eliminated because they didn't pass the test.
Wow.
And that was a little concerning. You want to make sure that you got a score. But as far as the harassment and the marching and the PT training and that kind of stuff, you know, I just kind of blew that off. I didn't have a problem with it, but some of the guys had really stressed out. We had a couple guys kind of go into mental stress, and they'd carry one guy out. They put him in a straitjacket to carry him out of the dorm one night.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, you know, boy, that's probably a good thing that he left the service, because it was, you know, parts of it were mentally stressful.
Yeah, I guess
I guess that's why they do that, to eliminate those guys that can't take that.
Sure, yeah. That would be a very similar circumstance then in basic. We had some people wash out essentially based off of.
I'd forgotten that term, but yeah, washout.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So going back to your tech school then. So just kind of a recap. You went all the way through your third physical and flight school, and that's when you washed out based off of that third physical.
Right.
And so when they redirected you, you're now going to be a aircraft mechanic.
Right.
And you're in tech school for this. And this is in Illinois?
Yes.
Okay. And so you're in Illinois at tech school. Explain to me what all was taking place for the tech school there.
Tech school was similar. It was broken down into so many week courses, and part of it was a technical aspect, and part of it was filling out the forms, aircraft manuals, all the paperwork end of it. How do you do, how do you fill out a form? What manuals do you use? How do you make sure a manual's current? The other part of the training was, you had actually a short course on airframe structure. You had a short course on airplane electronics. Had a propulsion course. Had a hydraulics course, and some of them. It wasn't hands-on like you were going to be a mechanic.
Right. Okay.
It was more short course in engineering. Hey, this is how a jet engine works. And you had guys in there. You had English majors. You had guys that were business majors. You had guys that were literature majors. And had other guys that were engineers. And some people got it and some people didn't. There's some people that they couldn't have told you how to open the hood on a car. And others of us, had mechanical experience. We could overhaul the engine if we have to. So it was pretty interesting going through the courses with some of those guys. And I think some of them probably were just as clueless when they came out as they were with the end, but they were still going to be aircraft maintenance officers. So you kind of wondered what their career was like. But they the courses were good. They really were. They didn't have a whole lot of hands-on. We had, you had out in the hangar, you had a cutaway of a jet engine, and you during a jet engine course, or you'd sit there and they were big on the overhead projectors back then, and everything was a projector on the board. You'd look at the diagrams of the compressor section and the ignition section and the burner section and all that, and then you'd go out in the hangar and here's a cutaway of a jet engine, and you actually get to see one. You don't actually work on it, but you get to see, hey, this is really a jet engine. Same thing with a hydraulics course and the airframe course. You do the classwork portion of it, and you go out in the hangar, and they've got the wing off of a B-52 or something out there. You get to look and see what they're talking about as far as aircraft structure. What holds the wing together, and what broken rivets look like. That type of thing. Wow.
So you're ending up being more of like you were saying, more the engineer, at least looking at the schematics and all that other stuff. Yeah, that's really interesting. So I was an aircraft weapons mechanic.
Okay.
For the F-16. So I had, of course, enlisted. I worked on. I had hands-on training during tech school. It was all. We did do some book work, but yeah, very interesting. Okay, so and how long again was tech school altogether?
We got there in September, I think, and left in May. So, what's that? 6, 8, 7 months, something like that.
Yeah, roughly around there. That's that's a pretty long tech school, and so I imagine during tech school were you assigned a specific aircraft?
No, not yet. When you went there, nobody had a clue, and the Air Force didn't have a clue where you were going. They just sat there to go through the maintenance school, and then the closer it got to the end of the course, when it got, I can't remember what the time frame was, but when it started getting closer to the end of the course, then they assigned you to a command. They picked X number of names, and like SAC had a requirement. SAC needed X number of aircraft maintenance officers, you know, and ADC needed X number of maintenance officers, and MAC needed so many. So they'd take, I guess, just an arbitrary thing. They just gather up so many names, and they'd send them to MAC, and they say, hey, these people are going to belong to you. You know, they're yours now. Do with what you want. So everybody got a command assignment first, and then like 2 weeks, 3 weeks after you got a command assignment, the command guys, you know, their officer assignment section, look through your paperwork, and just a random deal, roll of the dice, I guess. And you had your dream sheet. Did you get to fill out a dream sheet where, you know, hey, this is where I'd like to go?
Right.
You and you think, yeah, what's the chances of that? So everybody's got their dream sheet. And I guess the command guys are looking at the dream sheet. They say, yeah, this guy wanted to go to California. We'll, you know, give him his choice. We'll send him to California. So pretty close to about a month or so before the course was over, then you actually got a base assignment as to where you're actually going to go when you got out of school.
Okay.
And that was kind of interesting because when we first got there, the word was, and the course instructors actually told you that. They said, don't call officer assignments. Said, you cannot use the telephone. Do not go in the office. Do not use the telephone. Do not call officer assignments. They said, if you call officer assignments, when you get to your first assignment, there's going to be a letter of reprimand for you. And all during OTS, they had preached, you know, take control of your career. You know, do multiple, you know, cultivate where you go, what's going to happen to you. Look after your, you know, set a goal of where you want to go, what you want to do in the Air Force. And I kept thinking, you know, it really doesn't match up with what they're telling us. We get up there to school and it doesn't really match up. And I think that was just a story they told you to keep the students out of the offices, I think. When we got our command assignments, I got the Military Airlift Command, and I got thinking about that. So I snuck off during break one day. I always had a coffee break during the class, so I snuck off during the break one day and went down to the office and snuck in and got on the telephone. I called the Military Airlift Command Officer Assignment Section. You know, Sergeant so-and-so answered the phone, and I told him who I was, and I said, I'm in aircraft maintenance school, and I said, I've just been assigned to MAC, and I said, I'm just kind of curious. I said, what's going to happen from here? And he said, Rogers, he said, yes. He said, I remember seeing your folder. He said, they just handed me a whole stack of folders of all you new guys. And he said, I saw your name in there. He said, where do you want to go? And so I had died in my mind. For some reason, I wanted to go to California. And I said, well, I kind of wanted to go to Mather. I forget where I wanted to go. I wanted to go to one of the bases in California. And I could hear him shuffling papers. And he said, I can't do California. He said, what's your second choice? I said, well, how about Texas? And he said, what would you think about Kelly Air Force Base? And I said, that's in San Antonio. I said, that'd be great. I said, I'd love San Antonio when we were in school down there. And he said, I'll put you down for a military airlift squadron in San Antonio. So I said, hey, great, you know, hung up. I went back to class and walked in. I said, hey, I'm going to 19th Military Airlift Squadron in San Antonio in there. Everybody said, oh, bull, you know. I said, I called officer assignments at MAC. I said, I talked to the guy, he was really nice, and gave me a pick of where I wanted to go. And they all thought I was kidding. Nobody thought I was serious. And I told them, I said, hey, just wait a couple of weeks. I said, I'll show you. And the assignment came down at San Antonio, Kelly Air Force Base.
That's great. And no letter of reprimand.
Oh, no. Yeah.
That's awesome.
But I kind of took that, you know, that was one of those things that I said, you know, hey, they're serious about you taking control of your career. You know, they want you to take an interest in what's going to happen to you. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's a good thing you did.
Yeah, I was happy about that.
So, okay, so your first assignment ends up being at Kelly Air Force Base. What time was it that you ended up PCSing to Kelly?
Let's see, it would have been May of 1968.
Okay.
I went to Kelly.
May of 1968. All right. And tell me about Kelly Air Force Base and when you arrived there?
The unit I was assigned to was a MAC unit, and we were a tenant on base. We had C-124s. We were a tenant on the base, which got you out of a lot of stuff. You weren't assigned to the parent unit of the base. So officer of the day and some of that, make it, you know, going to doing a parade and that kind of stuff. It kind of got you out of that, which was nice. But the squadron had C-124s, but my first job, I ran what they call the en route support squadron, which we did a fast turnaround. All the C-141s, any transient aircraft that came into Kelly, that was a MAC aircraft, we did quick turnarounds on them. When that landed, they downloaded their cargo, either that or uploaded cargo or both. And we would refuel them, kick the tires, clean the windshield, and fill them full of gas and turn them in supposedly 30 minutes and send them on their way.
Oh, wow. So, okay, so that was your mission,
Right.
essentially. And was that more logistical or mechanical at that?
Well, our end was mechanical because we did, you know, a quick turn on the airplanes when they landed, and if they had a problem, any of them had a problem, or we had fixed it.
Okay, I gotcha.
The idea was they wanted especially the C-141s, because they were just back and forth in the Southeast Asia and back. That was all they were hauling cargo in and out. So they didn't want them sitting on the ground. So we were supposed to do a 30-minute turnaround through flight inspection and fill it up full of fuel.
I see.
I had a separate unit. We weren't responsible for the cargo. They had a separate unit that downloaded the cargo and uploaded whatever they were going to haul out of there.
Okay, I see. And so that was the main mission there with C-141.
Now the squadron itself, my unit was just kind of a branch, kind of an offshoot of the squadron.
Mm-hmm.
The squadron itself that flew the C-124s had kind of an odd mission, and I was so involved in my job, they just put me directly in that job. I didn't get that involved in the squadron and what they did until a little later on, and I began to wonder. I began to look at the forms on the C-124s, and I realized that when they left Kelly Air Force Base, they went to Amarillo, and they stopped in Amarillo, and then they went to Europe, and then they came back from Europe, and instead of coming to Kelly Air Force Base, they went to Amarillo, and then they came back into Kelly. Amarillo and Kelly, San Antonio and Amarillo, not that far apart, and I never could understand. I began to wonder, why do we go to Amarillo all the time? So I finally asked somebody, and I found out actually what their job was. We ferried nuclear warheads in and out of Europe.
Oh.
The repair facility, the maintenance facility on nuclear warheads was in Amarillo. And they were just like any mechanical device, they pull periodic inspections on them. And I don't know, every yearly or 2 years or something like that, they took the warheads off the missiles that were stationed in Europe, brought them back to the States, updated them or whatever they did, and pull a periodic inspection on them, and then we'd pick them up and take them back to Europe.
Wow.
Took me a while to figure that out, but it's kind of. And then while I'd been there about a year, and we found out they were going to deactivate the squadron. They were turning that job over, the nuke deal. They were, I guess, going to fly C-141s, which made sense because it was a lot more efficient airplane than a old shaky. So.
Wow. That's pretty incredible. Especially the turnaround that you had. I mean, only 30 minutes per aircraft that you had for a turnaround for the basics. Okay. So while you're at Kelly Air Force Base, is this the first time you meet up with your wife then again after training, or was your wife?
No, she went to Illinois with me.
She did. Okay. Okay. So and then. So you both moved to Kelly, or PCS to Kelly. You're familiar with Kelly. Is this her first time at Kelly? Or in
Yes,
Texas, the Texas
while I was
area?
in OTS, I think she came down once, and then for the commissioning ceremony, she came down.
Okay, all right.
So she knew a little bit about
Little
San
bit.
Antonio.
Yeah, yeah. So then, what did you guys do for recreation during your times off?
Oh, she was, when we got to San Antonio, she was pregnant. And then 68, late 68, our first baby was born. So that pretty well ties you down.
Yes.
We didn't do a whole lot of recreation in San Antonio. We went out a lot, but San Antonio was an interesting place. And during that time, they had a thing called a hemisphere in San Antonio, which was kind of a World's Fair sort of thing. And it was downtown San Antonio, and there was a lot going on during that. There was a lot of entertainment, a lot going on during that period. But, so that was kind of interesting.
You do the river walk?
Did the river walk,
Beautiful.
all that.
Yeah. Okay. So, spent your time there at Kelly Air Force Base. What was the next move from there?
Well, like I just mentioned, we found out they were going to deactivate that squadron. So obviously, everybody in that squadron is going to get shipped someplace else sooner than later. A couple of there were several of us young lieutenants there, and one of them got an assignment to Guam. One of them got assigned to the Philippines. Neither one of those would have been my choice, prime assignments. Both of them were unaccompanied assignments. But they were longer than a year. They were at least 18 months. I think some of them 2 years or longer. They were unaccompanied.
Wow.
So I talked it over with my wife, and I said, sooner or later, of course, you don't have a clue how long, what was going to happen in Vietnam. At that point, it was really going gangbusters, and we didn't know what was going to happen. Nobody did. So we said, everybody's figuring sooner or later, you're probably going to end up in Vietnam. And I told my wife, I said, hey, if I go, it's only a year. We get extra pay for going. I said, when I get back, probably get a nice assignment coming back versus what we may get out of here. I said, the way things are going down here, these guys aren't getting just real choice assignments. And I said, they're still going to have a remote assignment. I said, that won't check off their square for a remote assignment, even if they go to Guam or the Philippines. I said, so they'll still be eligible to go to Vietnam. I said, theoretically, they could be sent from Guam to Vietnam. I said, why don't I volunteer, go to Vietnam and get it over with? And she was okay with that. She saw my reasoning, and she was okay with that. So I went down to see base assignments, and I said, hey, I want to volunteer for Vietnam. What do I do? And they looked at me like I was falling out of a tree. I said, where did this guy come from? We don't get volunteers in here. So he said, well, you got to fill out a volunteer statement. And they said the volunteer statement, it goes to, copy goes to Air Force, and a copy goes to your command you belong to. And I said, they'll assign you. I said, if your command has a spot for you, they will make an assignment for you. I said, if they don't, they will turn you over to Air Force. Air Force will turn you over to PACAF, and PACAF will give you an assignment. So I filled out the volunteer statement, and I called. In the meantime, I had called officer assignments at MAC and told them I was going to volunteer. And then he was the one, he said, well, you got to start at the local level of base at Kelly, and you put in your statement. And he said, then I'll get it sooner or later. And he said, then we'll go from there. So I put my statement in and called officer assignments at MAC, and I said, hey, I just got my statement in. I said, I told them to get it in the mail so you guys get it. He said, I'll call you when I get it. And he called me when he got it, and we sat down and discussed all the possibilities. And he said, at the time, almost everybody in Vietnam was, in fact, as in all of Southeast Asia, belonged to either 7th Air Force or PACAF. There weren't very many individual command assignments over there. So really the chances that I was going to get a MAC assignment was really pretty slim. But after I called officer assignments at MAC, he was going through all this, and he said, you know, he said, I've got an opening for junior aircraft officer at Da Nang. He said, is that something you want to be interested in? I said, sign me up.
Wow.
So
Man.
a couple months later, I was on my way.
On your way to Da Nang. Oh, wow. That is... Well, you're really taking control of your career at this point.
I'm trying to look after myself.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, that's really good. That's really good. All right, so you make the choice to go to Da Nang at this point. Your wife's okay with it. She's in full support of it. Logic seems pretty sound. Tell me about the flight over then at this point. What year, let's start off with what year it is, and then your flight over.
January 1970.
Yeah.
We left San Antonio, I think right after New Year's, if I remember correctly. And I moved her back to Oklahoma, the same town where she grew up and where her parents lived. Got her situated in a rent house, and January the 30th, something like that, went to Oklahoma City and got on just a commercial airliner and went to May 3rd or March, I don't remember, went to California, was the big departure area out there, and got on a charter flight with nothing but GIs and went straight to Vietnam. 23 hours later,
Oh, wow.
we landed at Da Nang.
Direct flight.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Dre, we stopped at Okinawa for refuel.
Okay. Okinawa. Yeah. Did they send you to any training beforehand?
Went to helicopter school at Eglin Air Force Base. Went to like a 4-week course maybe on HH-53 helicopters. And then we got to go over to Lackland and supposedly went to a small arms course to learn how to shoot the M16. That was almost a joke. I don't remember. I guess we finally ended up getting fired there. I think they were short of ammo at that time. So we spent a couple hours in the classroom. How much classroom time can you spend on how to shoot an M16? But most of the time we were in the classroom, and I think we finally went out to the firing range. But if I remember, I think they said they had a shortage of ammunition, and so we kind of played around with the gun, got back on the bus, and went back. So,
Oh man, it was all overseas.
that was our combat training.
Oh goodness. All right. So you had a helicopter you were trained on. It was the HH
53.
53. And what kind of helicopter was this?
Super Jolly Green. Same thing the Marines used. The ironic thing was, I went to school on the HH-53, and I got to Da Nang and they had HH-3s, which is similar but a lot different. It's just a smaller version. They were in the works to get HH-53s, but I was there maybe 4 months or so, maybe 5 months before I saw my HH-53. We had HH-3s when I got there.
Oh, wow.
But they were similar enough that, hey, at least I'd seen a helicopter when I got there. Some of the guys there missed their training, and they got there and they'd never seen a helicopter before. Some of my mechanics.
Oh wow. Wow. Okay, so let's talk about first impressions when you get to Vietnam. What were some of those?
Landed in the middle of the night, really dark. Da Nang is a really big base, and all the Air Force guys, half the Air Force was on one side of Da Nang, and the Marines had basically the other side of Da Nang. And the aerial port was on the Marine side. You came in over there. So all the Air Force guys, they had what looked like a cattle truck. It was a semi-trailer that was pulled by a tractor and literally had board sides on it that looked like something you'd take a tour at Disneyland on. They had wooden seats, so you all climb on this, basically a cattle trailer, and they haul you around the end of the runway over to the Air Force side and just dump you off. You're on your own, then you got to find it. Theoretically, I guess they're supposed to know, your squadron or whatever's supposed to know that you're coming in, but that didn't work out. Always work out. And that was another strange thing. Almost everybody that went, like I said, belonged to PACAF or belonged to 7th Air Force. And when I went to Vietnam, I was actually assigned to MAC, which that was a little unusual. We were a tenant on the base at Da Nang. Da Nang was technically run by TAC, or 7th Air Force, the F4 base. And they were the base wing and pretty much controlled what went on the base. But there were a lot of other tenant units. There was a SAC unit that flew U-2s and a bunch of other tenants on the base. But most of the guys belonged to 7th Air Force that were on there.
Really?
So their in-processing effort was a little bit different than ours, because we were a separate unit, separate squadron from them.
Mm. Yeah, did that complicate things very much?
No, actually it made things a whole lot easier, because you didn't have to put up with all the BS of being in a base wing. Your personnel office you still had to go through base personnel. You had to still go through all the regular, like when you assigned came in PCS to a base. Mm-hmm. You still had to go through the in-processing.
Yeah.
But we had our own personnel, the squadron, we had our own personnel, people that took care of that, the paperwork. It actually made it a whole lot easier being in a small unit.
That's good. That's real good.
And they looked after you a lot better. Once I got on base, somehow, I don't even remember now how, I made contact with the squadron, and they sent a guy down, and we had our own barracks where the pilot stayed, and they took me to the barracks and showed me to a room and put me up for the night and said, "We'll see you in the morning." So.
All right, so you're all in process there, and what then became your main mission? Because you're there working on helicopters, obviously. You start off with the HH-3, and you're then going to move on to the larger sized ones. But what is your main mission being there?
Our mission, we were an air rescue squadron, and we had two airplanes that sat on 5-minute scramble notice. We had 2 airplanes that were on 15-minute scramble notice, and then we had backups to those. As soon as those 2 airplanes launched, the 5-minute airplanes went first, and then we pulled the 15-minute airplanes up, unless sometimes they launched all 4 of them at once, depending on what was happening. But as soon as the 2 5-minute birds were gone, you pulled the 2 15-minute birds up in their spot, and you started getting 2 more ready to go and pulled up in their spot. But when somebody got shot down, when one of the F4 or whatever it was, sometimes it wasn't even a shoot down. Sometimes it was, just for whatever reason, mechanical failure or whatever. When an airplane went down, we went out to try to rescue the air crew.
Wow.
Regardless of where they were, whether it was out in the ocean or whether it was in North Vietnam or South Vietnam or over Laos or wherever, it was our job to go pick them up, bring them back.
Man, that's an incredible mission. That is an incredible mission.
When I arrived there, the air rescue was the most highly decorated squadron in all of Southeast Asia.
Yeah. Wow. You guys had the PJs with you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow. Man. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that when I went through tech school, we heard stories of, the PJ stories came from I bet it was probably that squadron. That's pretty incredible.
We had a sister squadron in Thailand. The 40th Air Rescue Squadron operated out of NKP in Thailand and Udorn in Thailand.
Yeah, that's right. Wow, that's pretty amazing. Okay, so how much different, or describe to me like your what were some of the major differences between what you were doing at Kelly with the carriers to now what you're doing in Vietnam?
Basically, kind of the same thing. You know, just maintaining the airplanes was the big. Of course, the situation was totally different. Be perfectly honest with you, our facilities were bad. We were in an old French-built hangar that was too small. We were, the whole year I was there, and I think that was probably common for most of it. We were short of people. We didn't have enough skilled mechanics. Part situation was bad. We couldn't get parts sometimes, and you had to deal with the airplanes. Some of them were getting a little old by that time. We got the HH-53s, they were all brand new, but that was a whole different set of problems. But some of the airplanes had had a rough life. You had a lot of mechanical problems on them because of the mission they flew. Had one would get shot up occasionally. Occasionally would have one go down somewhere and you'd have to go get it. But that was the most exciting part of my job, I guess you would say. But it was pretty routine. There was a lot of long hours. When the sun came up, they expected us to have 2 airplanes out there. As soon as the sun came up, we were supposed to have those 4 airplanes on alert. The crews assigned to them and ready to go. And then the rest of the day was just fixing what was broken and trying to get more airplanes fixed. It was just every day was the same like that. And then when that alert scramble horn went off, that's when the action started. And you launched the 2 alert birds and pulled the others up. And sometimes you'd get airborne and they'd cancel the thing and everything turned out okay. And sometimes it would go on for 2 or 3 days and you just refueling them and turning them around and fixing them and putting them back in the air just as fast as you could turn them.
Yeah. So a lot of the describe to me like what were some of your major what were some of your more common repairs? Was it mostly flak or bullet holes or just rough, them being rough on the aircraft itself?
Had a lot of landing gear problems. They did have retractable landing gear on those things. It was kind of a poor design, and if they had a rough landing, if they would come in at an angle and a rough landing, it usually screw up the landing gear. And that was, to do that, you had to jack the airplane up, and that's always a complicated procedure. Anytime you got to jack an airplane, it's an accident looking for a place to happen. So that was always a big concern. Matter of fact, a lot of the airplanes, we had the pins in the landing gear so they would not retract. And we had the pins safety wired in so they wouldn't come out. And you just tell the pilot, hey, don't retract the gear on this one because it's going to be a problem if you do. So a lot of them flew with the gear down just because we didn't have time or the equipment to fix them.
Wow.
Had just routine maintenance was keeping up with all the routine stuff. The electronics on them was the continuing problem. The humidity, the heat and the humidity was really tough on the electronics on them. So seemed like he always had electronic problems. Don't remember any one specific thing that was a major concern. It was just always always behind the power curve. It seemed like we were short airplanes. Didn't ever have enough airplanes. Never had enough mechanics. Never had enough parts. Yeah. So you just kept plugging away, and when the sun came up, you put 4 of them out there, and when that night you counted up and see how many you had that would fly the next day, and if you didn't have enough that would fly the next day, you said, "Sorry guys, nobody's going home tonight." You know, and you stayed there till you got them fixed. Mm. If it took, you know, if you were still there when the sun came up the next morning, that's just the way it was. You stayed there fixing airplanes until you had enough fixed to fly.
Wow. Now, you yourself, did you develop quite a bond with your crew and the crews of the aircraft?
I did. In our squadron, because we were the type of unit that we were, and we were, like I said, we were a tenant unit, so we were small. There was only myself. There were 2 maintenance officers. There was a senior maintenance officer, and then there was myself. So we had 2 maintenance officers and 1 supply officer. Everybody else was a pilot in the squadron. There was an officer. And so they made provisions for us. They had special quarters for the pilot. Pilots had air-conditioned quarters. They had basically a dormitory with air-conditioned room. They had 2-man rooms with air conditioners in them. So they took care of us non-rated guys, the 3 non-rated guys. They provided us and really took care of us well. So we lived up with the pilots. So you ate with them, you slept with them, ate with them. My roommate was a pilot. And that's one thing they told you when you first got there. They said, don't become real close friends with the pilots, you know, because of what might happen. But you couldn't help, you know. Ate with them, you drank with them, you slept with them, you partied with them. So it was common to get close to them. Sure. The enlisted guys, the senior enlisted guys had we had a great bunch of enlisted guys, especially the senior guys. They had, I think it was really an old house they called Menopause Manor, and all the techs and above, which I didn't have that many, but the techs and above lived in that old house, and they kind of did their own thing. The rest of the guys lived in the barracks, which was, well, we did an overhaul on the barracks. Well, it was kind of a squadron project to overhaul the barracks, clean it up a lot and fix it up, because it was crap when we got there. But had a real good rapport with the guy. I mean, we had very few problems. You know, you always got a couple, but very few problems with the guys. Good. Everybody was in the same boat, and everybody knew what the job was. And but when that scramble horn went off, it was 110%.
Yeah, guys are
out of everybody. Very, very, very few problems.
Yeah,
bunch of dedicated guys, bunch of guys who just did great work.
Awesome. How long were you in Vietnam altogether?
For a year.
A year.
Just almost a year to the day.
Okay. No extended tour?
No. Our ops officer asked me if I would stay. He was going to take over command of the squadron, and he asked me to stay. And I thought about it, and I had a new baby, you know, at home that that was 15 months old when I left. And I just had to tell him, I said, you know, if I don't come home, I said, you know, my wife's she's got a circle on the calendar. I said, if I'm not there, I said, I think I probably would have a problem. I said, I just can't do it. I would kind of like to stay, because you know, when you left, you had such an attachment that you just really, it was hard to leave. It's you know, you joked about it. You know, from the time you got there, you started counting the days down, and you joked about it. And when you got to 30 days, they had this little special patch that said "short" on it. I don't know if you've ever seen one before, but it just was a pair of boots with a cap on top of the boots, and it said "short." And when you got 30 days, you were authorized unofficially to wear the short patch. So you got one for your fatigues and one for your cap. You wore a short patch the last 30 days, you know, and then you started marking the days off the calendar, and some of them knew the hours and all that kind of stuff. But when it came down to it, saying goodbye, it was tough.
How did you stay in touch with your family while you were there?
Wrote a letter almost every night to my wife. Wasn't as good as I should have been to my siblings and my parents. I tried to write my parents as often as I could, but I wrote my wife just almost every night unless there was something came up that I couldn't or didn't or wasn't there.
That's good.
And she was really good. She wrote me every day.
How often were you able to receive those letters?
Pretty regular basis, but sometimes they get bunched up. You know, sometimes you'd get one that had been written 2 or 3 or 4 days after. You know, you'd miss one, and you'd get one, and she would reference something from the last letter, and you'd say, "What's she talking about? I don't remember that." And then 2 days later, you'd get the letter, you know, from a couple days earlier. Sometimes they'd bunch up, and you'd get 2 and 3 and 4 at a time, but they had pretty regular service.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And while you're at Da Nang, did the base itself, did it get attacked or anything?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it mainly mortars or
Rockets.
rockets?
Da Nang was called Rocket City. And it just wasn't uncommon at all. And you'd go through a lull period. You'd go through a period where nothing had happened for quite a while. And then you'd go through another period where every couple of days they'd have a couple of rockets slam into the base. And it was so big that, you know, they could hit the other side of the base and you might not even know it. They always blew the siren when they did, but we were lucky. One night, we took about 3 of them right in the middle of our revetments where our airplanes were parked. And we had damage. Like I said, when the sun came up, we had 0. We had no airplanes that were flyable. Everything we had some kind of damage to it. Most of it was pretty light damage. We didn't take any direct hits. Most of it like landed in the middle of the revetments, but you had to shrapnel it. So we had windshields with, you know, shrapnel holes through them and some of that kind of stuff. But boy, it was quite a chore getting everything up and getting our airplanes on alert that morning.
I bet. All right. Well, so did your year tour in Vietnam, and you're about to come home. So what year is it that you are now about to head back to? Did you get orders? Where did you end up getting orders after Vietnam? Let's go there.
Back to McCord Air Force Base. I guess Mac didn't have it. Theoretically, when I came back, I still belonged to Mac, and I guess they didn't have a spot for me coming back, and they gave me to ADC. I don't know how that works, but anyhow, I ended up with the Air Defense Command at McCord F-106 unit, McCord Air Force Base.
Okay, where's McCord again?
It's in Tacoma, Washington.
Okay.
Right south of Seattle. Beautiful area. Great assignment.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So you end up coming back, and this is again, what year were you coming back?
71.
1971. Get back home. How was the experience coming back now to America?
I didn't go through the one a lot of the guys went through. Oklahoma wasn't a real hotbed for protest and hippies and that. You know, there was a certain amount of that stuff going on, but Oklahoma was fairly laid back and conservative, and we didn't have much of that. And I landed in California. I did have a real concern about that because I knew, you know, you saw it on the news and you heard a lot of stories, and I had to fly out of LAX. We came back, we landed back in California, and then they put us on a bus and took us down to LAX to fly home, you know, wherever you were going to go out of there. And I was really concerned about that because I had made up my mind that some hippie wasn't going to walk up and pin a flower on me. Mentally, I couldn't have handled that. And I figured I'd probably be the one that ended up in jail, but I said, this is just not gonna happen. And I was very concerned about that, but I had no problem. Nobody said anything, and I was in uniform when I went through LAX.
Oh, yeah.
And nobody said anything to me. I didn't have any problems. Got on the airplane and had a nonstop flight in Oklahoma City.
I'm glad nobody
Yeah, I was too.
really challenged you.
I was too, because I was concerned about that. And we spent a little time, of course, we were packing up the house when we got back to Oklahoma. We were packing up the house, getting ready to move to Washington. And when the hippies in Cushing, Oklahoma, there wasn't anybody to bother me there. So we got to McCord, and we lived on base in McCord. And when you went off base, you were in civilian clothes. And we weren't exposed to any of that up there. There was no protest, or didn't have to worry about it. And I never was really affected by that, what a lot of guys had to go through.
That's good.
Yeah, and I was glad.
Yeah. Okay, so how long were you then at McCord, right?
McCord,
yeah.
right.
How long were you at McCord?
Less than 2 years.
Oh, really?
I was in the fighter squadron, and we got there in January. Well, actually, it was probably February something when we got there, and we left the following. We were there less than 2 years, and they sent me down to Peterson Field, which is at Colorado Springs, and their main function was they supported the NORAD, which is where Cheyenne Mountain is at, and NORAD, Air Defense Command headquarters, was basically in downtown Colorado Springs, a big business building. They had Cheyenne Mountain, which where NORAD was at, and had the Air Force Academy. And we supported all three of those functions with aircraft. That was the...
That's a beautiful base there.
Pretty
as well.
nice area.
Yeah.
And we got there, and the Air Force, you know, with the war and all, and the war was starting to wind down a little bit at that point. And they had been shuffling guys, you know, in and out of Vietnam, and everybody had been in turmoil and moving everybody around. So the Air Force came out and said, guaranteed 3-year tours. Your next PCS, we're going to guarantee you that you're going to be there 3 years. We're going to stabilize everybody. You're going to quit all these moving everybody around. And so we went to Colorado Springs and bought a house because we're going to be here 3 years, right? Brand new house, matter of fact, didn't even have a yard, had dirt rocks for a yard. So the whole first year, we're working on the house. We're putting the yard in, we're putting the garden in, we're planting flowers, planting trees. We didn't even have time. We didn't go snow skiing that winter because we were still, you know, doing the house thing. And by this time, we had a second baby, and we didn't do a whole lot of sightseeing. We didn't get out and look around Colorado, because we thought, oh, we got plenty of time for that, right? Commander called me. I'd been there, well, I went to squadron officer school, so that was a 6 weeks, 8 week thing that I went to Alabama. The first year I was there, and then we'd been there about 16 months maybe. And I was doing a night deal. I was the night chief of maintenance, and this commander called me and he said, boy, we've got a deal for you. And I said, I could see the handwriting on the wall. I just knew what he was going to say. And I said, no, I said, you can't do this. He said, well, he said, yeah, he said, they've already requested a waiver. He said, we want you to go down to Tucson. He said, they're opening up a new unit in Tucson. They're going to have an alert detachment in Tucson. He said, we need somebody to go down there and organize it. get it set up, get it running. Said this is going to be the first one of these. Air Defense Command is going to do several of these. And said this is going to be the first one, and so we need somebody to go down there and get it up, get it running, get it organized, so we can pattern the rest of them like it, you know. And yeah, I knew it was going to be an opportunity, but I didn't want to go. But ended up going in. I've been to Colorado Springs less than a year and a half, and we're on the road again.
Wow. So was this going to end up being a command for you, or this new opportunity?
It wasn't really a command, but it was another really small unit. We had I was the maintenance. We had a detachment commander was a major, and I was a captain, and I was the maintenance officer. We didn't even have any airplanes. Our airplanes were stationed. Technically, I was assigned to the 5th Fighter Interceptor Squadron out of Minot, North Dakota. But I was stationed at Detachment 1 in Tucson. Okay? Our airplanes rotated weekly out of Minot. They'd fly 2 F-106s down. We had 2 on the ground in Tucson. We'd put 2 pilots in them and send them back to Minot. And we'd have 2 fresh airplanes. And they would stay a week, and we'd do that over again.
Wow.
We just rotated airplanes in and out of Minot.
Wow. That's pretty crazy. So then how long were you, did you end up staying in Tucson?
I was there a year and got out.
A year and got out.
Yep.
So, as in you got out of the military,
Yep.
or okay. And total service time ended up being
8 years.
8 years. 8 years. Wow, that's really good.
When we moved back to Oklahoma, when I got out, that was our 7th move in 8 years.
Yeah. Wow.
Kids were getting ready to start school. Oldest one had just enrolled him in kindergarten in Tucson. He was going to be in the 1st grade the next year.
So it was a good decision, one that you and your wife had made together at that point.
Wasn't it?
That's good. Okay. So then what did you end up doing after the military?
Worked in an auto parts store for about 6 months. I thought I had a deal made to actually buy this store when I got out, and the guy backed out on me. But then about 6 months later, he changed his mind. So I got an auto parts business, bought an auto parts store, and ran an auto parts store for the next 30 years.
Oh wow! All right. Very nice. Did you ever get back into dragsters?
No, I built a hot rod. I finally got a chance to build my hot rod.
And what is that?
I had a 1932 Ford Coupe.
Oh. Very nice.
We actually bought it before I went to the Air Force. Right after I graduated from Oklahoma State, and I knew we were going in the Air Force. The opportunity came up, and I just couldn't pass it up, so I bought this thing. And we towed in on a tow bar. We took it to Illinois with us, and took it to San Antonio, and all the way to Washington State, Colorado Springs, Tucson.
So your wife married you and the car.
Yep. And we had that car for 39 years.
Oh, that's funny. Wow. All right, so you're here in Ohio. So you're actually, you live in Oklahoma,
Right.
but you're here in Ohio. What brought you to Ohio?
The Air Force Museum.
And you want to talk about?
I saw several years ago, the Jolly Green Association has a website, and I think that's where I saw it, where the museum had acquired one of the HH-3s that I had when I was at Dayton. and they were in the process of refurbishing it and putting it back to the same way it was in Vietnam. And then they were going to put it on display. And 2 years ago, they had the dedication ceremony and put it in the museum. And I told my wife at that time, I said, I gotta go see the airplane.
So here you are.
Where are you?
Yeah. And I mean, if it's up to you, do you mind describing why the HH3 is so special, aside from?
I don't know if that's, I don't think it's common for most guys, but I think I probably got overly emotional attached to my job and to the airplane. I wasn't the other units I was in, you know, I liked them, loved the airplanes and all that, but I just didn't have the emotional attachment. They were kind of like my kids, you know. When one of them got shot up or had a problem that you know, having a problem fixing, you go down and spend the night with it. You're there sitting up 24 hours with it, working on the thing, you know, trying to. We had a shortage of airplanes. Usually we were hurting for airplanes to fly. So it was critical. The numbers of airplanes were critical. And basically you were getting graded, you know, maintenance officer, you were kind of getting graded on the performance of the airplanes. How many, you know, if they didn't have, if the pilots didn't have airplanes to fly, somebody wanted to know why. So it was your job to make sure that they had adequate numbers of airplanes, and of course your goal was to have them all fixed, all of them ready, but that's not possible. But when they were down, you just stayed with them until they were fixed. And I think I got probably more emotionally attached than I should have. It sounds kind of silly, but
Not at all. That's pretty incredible.
when they got shot down and when they went down somewhere, you went out and got it and fixed it and got it back to base.
I think that's pretty amazing. And so let's talk about, as we wrap up, I just have like a couple more questions for you. But have you been able to stay in contact with anybody from Vietnam that you were stationed with?
You know, I haven't. And of course, when I left there, all those guys were either helicopter mechanics or helicopter pilots, and they went to, most of them I'm sure probably went back to other helicopter units, and I went to F-106s in a different command. So I had no connection, no tie-in. None of the bases I was ever assigned to, you know, had helicopters at it. So I was really separated from that way of life or whatever. And just really didn't keep in touch. Some of the guys, you'd see something on them about them every now and then, but then after I got out and the later years, back when we got a computer and all that stuff, you know, I found out there was such a thing as a Jolly Green association, and they had annual reunions and things like that. But I was never, like, being a store owner and having your own business and stuff like that. It's kind of hard to get away and go. So I never did go to any of the reunions. So I really didn't.
What about veteran organizations? Have you are you a part of any veteran organizations?
I'm not.
Okay. Yeah. But you're here. Got to see the museum. Got to see your plane once again. And that's That's really awesome.
Even if it hadn't been for my old plane being there, the museum is just awesome. You know, people that aren't into airplanes or whatever, I don't know if they would appreciate it or not, but if anybody's got any interest at all in the military or any interest at all in airplanes, that's the most incredible place I've ever been. That's just awesome.
It is really cool. Did they allow you to sit inside of the?
I contacted, when I read their little thing about their displays and all that, and you know, they're justifiably so, they can't have the public climbing all over that stuff, so, you know, you're outside the ropes. And I sent them an email and kind of explained who I was, and I had a attachment to that particular airplane, and asked them if there was any way that I could get inside the rope to have my picture made with the airplane. And got a great reply from the lady that deals with that. She sent me an email, gave me some contact information, and asked for some information from me, I guess, to, you know, confirm who I, you know, if I was for real. And she gave me a phone number, said call me. And I called her, and she said, I can set you up with a personal tour guide. She said, we'll let you under the ropes. So we'll set you up a time. You can come in the museum before the public is allowed. And it's just awesome. At first I felt kind of, I was so shocked and so awestruck by all that they'll let you inside the ropes, but they won't let you in the airplane. But there's special circumstances where they'll let you in the airplane. And we talked again later, and she said, you're just going inside the ropes. You don't want to go inside the airplane, right? And I said, well, I said, that's what I said at first. I said, but I didn't realize I had an option. I said, if it's not too late, I said, is it possible I could go in the airplane? She said, I'll take care of it. And she did. It was just awesome.
Wow. That's incredible. Man. All right. Well, you said you spent 30 years after you got out of military service, owning your own business, doing all that stuff. What characteristics did you pick up while you're in the military that helped you succeed outside of the military?
Oh, I think that, you know, you just got that understanding. First place, you got a lot of respect for what goes on around you. You pay attention, I think, more to the things that go on around you, particularly on an international basis. You're probably more interested in that. But you know, you can't help acquire a little bit of a leadership role when you've been in that position before. And I just learn so much when you're in how to organize things and how to treat people, and both on the professional side and the personal side. I think it just makes a huge difference in a person.
That's good. And then final question for you, where this is archived and has the potential for generations to view it, what would be your final message to them?
Golly. Oh, that's a hard one. I think just if, you know, it's so much different now that the military guys get so much more respect now than they used to. I think that's changed a lot, and I think that's really great. Guys that serve deserve everything you can give them when they get back. you know, especially guys that served in combat. Just, the average person out there absolutely can't comprehend that. They have no clue what that's like. You know, to get shot at, have a mortar round go off within, you know, rock throw from you. It's just, the average person just doesn't understand that. And I think those guys earn everything they get.
Well, John, I'd like to thank you very much for just telling your story and for everything that you've done, and thank you for your service.
Well, I really appreciate you guys doing it.